Right, good morning, welcome back. Now today, hydraulics. Time to get some fluid into the systems. Now all the calipers and the cylinders are fully rebuilt, they're just currently empty. So let's flood and bleed everything up so it all works. Now there are 3 separate hydraulic systems on the bike, front brake, rear brake and clutch, and I've got 3 completely different methods that I can use to flood them up. So just for fun, I'll use this video to demonstrate all 3, starting with the clutch. The oldest and simplest method of all, a jam jar, a piece of tube and a spanner for the bleed valve. This is the one your dad should have taught you. Now a bone dry, empty system can sometimes be challenging to flood up, but with a bit of patience and the application of a simple system of pumping the lever and opening the valve, actually it's pretty straightforward. So the method is, with fluid in the reservoir, pump the clutch lever several times and hold it in. Then open and shut the bleed valve, then let the lever out. In that order. Once again, pump the lever several times, hold it in. Open valve, shut valve, then let the lever out. Again, in that order. Do that cycle several times and you'll start to see bubbles coming out of the bleed tube at the bottom, and eventually fluid will come out and eventually a nice solid hydraulic lock. Straightforward. Okay, carefully. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold it in. Bubble, bubble. And again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Holding it in, open the valve. Here the bubbles push out into the fluid. And after about 4 cycles, you'll see the fluid has dropped and you will see your first fluid emerging out of the tube itself, full of bubbles. Don't forget to top up the reservoir as you go. And these little air bubbles are where they naturally float upwards, laws of physics and all that. You just wiggle the lever. The more of them that bubble out means the more fluid's going in. You can even see the level dropping. A little squirt of fluid coming up instead of air. We are solid. And do a couple more conventional bleeds downwards until you've got solid fluid coming out the bottom end. And eventually you'll feel it operate in the clutch, nice and crisp. Job done. Okay, next we'll do the rear brakes. Now these can be bled up in the same conventional way we just did the clutch, by pressing the pedal, opening the bleed valve, etc. But sometimes rear systems can be stubborn because unlike the front hydraulics, which are straight up and down, the hose system on this is horizontal. And that sometimes, like I said, can make them a little bit stubborn to bleed up. So I find with rear brakes, rather than mess about, it's far easier to just reach for a large syringe and back bleed the system in through the bleed valve in the caliper, up to the master cylinder, then up into the reservoir. Works first time. Right, now that has back purged the entire system right away up to the filler cap. So in theory, I should have a solid pedal. No, nothing at all. Now, if this was a single piston caliper with a single bleed valve, I would now have a solid pedal, but I haven't because this is a dual piston caliper with 2 bleed valves. Look on the inside, there's a bleed valve in there too, and I've done nothing with that. I didn't purge any fluid through it. I only purged through the outside bleed valve, so there's nothing in there at all. There's a large cavity of air on the inside of the caliper, and that's just squishing around and stopping me get hydraulic lock. So all I now need to do, now the system is full up, is just a conventional downward bleed using the pedal, like I did with the clutch, on the inside bleed valve. And once the inside of the caliper is fully bled up, then the whole system will be rock solid. Let's do that. There, back brake's done. Now, you may have seen one of these. This is a vacuum bleeder. It needs a compressor to run it, so it's probably the poshest in terms of equipment, but if you have got a compressor, you connect your air supply to the end and you pull the trigger. Once you've done that, air shoots out the end. It's passing across the top of the canister. It's all sealed. And once you pass air across the top of a void, it creates a vacuum in that void, simple laws of physics, and that starts to suck air in through these tubes. And you connect these two ends to your calipers. You open the valves and it starts to suck the air out of your braking system. And as long as you've put fluid in the top, it will start to suck the fluid down into the system. So you just keep the handle depressed until it starts to suck fluid out into these tubes and into the canister. Then you've got a fully bled system. It works like this. Right, we'll just hook up the bottle for convenience over the top there and connect up the hoses. There, literally 2 minutes to set that up. Open both the bleed valves, pop the rubber ends on, connect up your air supply and chuck some fluid in the reservoir. Now just got to pull the trigger. And as you pull the trigger, watch the fluid supply drop. Don't let it run out, keep topping it up. And as it drops, it's sucking fluid into the system. And when the fluid comes out the bottom into these hoses, it's bled up. Easy as that. Rubber gasket from an old oil filter. There. There, 3 methods of flooding up and bleeding your hydraulic systems. Now, all 3 of those methods take a little bit of practice to get good at, but they're skills worth learning because it will save you a fortune over your motorcycle lifetime. And if we're truly honest with ourselves, for many of us, our motorcycles are a luxury, an indulgence that we allow ourselves because we work hard. But that means that the bills they generate are a burden on top of the domestic bills, paying the mortgage, feeding the kids, heating the house. So if we can learn a few skills that makes them affordable, then in my view, that makes all the hard work worth it. I'll see you next time.